The desert sun beat down mercilessly on Rebecca Lane as she stumbled across the cracked earth, her horse having collapsed from exhaustion 3 miles back. And when she lifted her nearly empty canteen with trembling hands, she knew death was riding closer with every labored breath. The year was 1878, and she had been foolish enough to take what she thought was a shortcut from Sacramento to Virginia City, Nevada, carrying nothing but stubborn pride and insufficient supplies. Her father had warned her against traveling alone, but Rebecca had always been headstrong, always believed she could handle anything the world threw at her. Now, at 22 years old, she was learning a harsh lesson about overconfidence in the unforgiving Nevada desert. The landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, nothing but sand, scrub brush, and heat waves that made the horizon shimmer like water that did not exist. Her dark hair clung to her face and neck, soaked with sweat beneath her worn bonnet. The cotton dress she wore, once a respectable shade of blue, was now dusty and stained with the evidence of her 3-day ordeal. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, her tongue felt like leather in her mouth, and the small amount of water remaining in her canteen sloshed mockingly with each unsteady step. Rebecca had been traveling to Virginia City to take a position as a schoolteacher, one of the few respectable occupations available to an unmarried woman in the West. She had her teaching certificate, her letters of recommendation, and a burning desire to make something of herself beyond being some rancher's wife. Her mother had died when Rebecca was 16, and her father had remarried within a year to a woman who made it clear that Rebecca's continued presence in the household was unwelcome. So Rebecca had studied, saved every penny, and planned her escape to a new life. But none of that would matter if she died out here in this God-forsaken wasteland. She had rationed her water carefully for 2 days, but the heat had been worse than she anticipated. The map she had been following turned out to be outdated, showing a creek that had apparently dried up years ago. When her horse, a gentle mare named Daisy, had begun to falter yesterday afternoon, Rebecca had given the animal the last of the water, hoping they could make it to the next town. But Daisy had collapsed this morning, and Rebecca had no choice but to leave her behind, taking only her saddlebag with a few personal belongings, and the canteen that now held perhaps 2 swallows of water. She had been walking since dawn, and the sun was now approaching its zenith, the hottest part of the day. Her vision was beginning to blur at the edges, and she knew these were the warning signs of heat sickness. She needed shade, water, and rest, but the landscape offered none of these mercies. Rebecca paused, swaying slightly on her feet, and lifted the canteen to her lips. She allowed herself one small sip, barely enough to wet her mouth, and the warm water tasted like the finest champagne. She corked the canteen carefully, knowing that single swallow might have to last her until nightfall, or forever. Just as despair began to truly take hold, she saw something in the distance. At first, she thought it was another cruel mirage, but as she squinted against the glare, she could make out a figure on horseback, leading what looked like a pack mule. The figure was moving perpendicular to her path, perhaps half a mile away. Rebecca tried to call out, but her voice came out as barely a croak. She waved her arms frantically, nearly dropping her precious canteen in the process. The figure did not seem to notice her. Panic gave her a burst of energy, and she stumbled forward, waving and trying to shout, making whatever noise she could. For several agonizing minutes, she thought the rider would pass by without seeing her. But then the figure stopped, turned, and after a moment's pause, changed direction and began heading toward her. Relief flooded through Rebecca so intensely that her knees buckled, and she sank to the ground, unable to stand any longer. She watched through tear-blurred eyes as the rider approached, growing larger and more distinct with each moment. It was a man, she could see now, tall and broad-shouldered, sitting easy in the saddle with the confidence of someone who had spent his entire life on horseback. He wore the practical clothing of a rancher, worn leather chaps, a dark vest over a faded blue shirt, a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face from the brutal sun. As he drew closer, she could make out more details. A strong jaw darkened with several days' worth of stubble, eyes that were some light color she could not quite determine, and an expression of concern mixed with what might have been surprise. He pulled his horse to a stop a few feet from where she sat in the dust and dismounted in one fluid motion. Rebecca tried to stand to maintain some shred of dignity, but her legs would not cooperate. The man approached quickly, going down on one knee beside her. "Easy now," he said, his voice low and steady, like he was gentling a spooked horse. "You are in a bad way, miss. When did you last have water?" Rebecca tried to answer, but her throat was too dry. She held up her canteen weakly, and he took it from her, testing its weight. "Nearly empty," he observed, his expression growing grimmer. He stood and strode back to his horse, unhooking one of two large canteens from his saddle. When he returned and unscrewed the cap, Rebecca could smell the water, clean and fresh, and she reached for it desperately. But instead of drinking himself or rationing it out in tiny sips as she had been doing, Isaac Kane did something that surprised her. He held the canteen to her lips and said, "Drink. Slow sips, but drink your fill. You need it more than I do right now." The cool water touched her lips, and Rebecca had to fight every instinct not to gulp it down. She forced herself to drink slowly small sips as he had instructed, but the relief was so profound that tears began to stream down her dusty cheeks. After several swallows, he pulled the canteen back. "Give it a minute to settle," he said gently. "Then you can have more." Rebecca nodded, not trusting herself to speak yet. She studied him more carefully now that her immediate desperation had eased slightly. He was perhaps 27 or 28, with sun-bronzed skin that spoke of years working outdoors. His eyes, she could see now, were a striking shade of gray-blue, like storm clouds over mountains. There was strength in his features, but also a certain kindness that had not been beaten out of him by the harsh land. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked after a moment. "Rebecca," she managed, her voice hoarse and cracked. "Rebecca Lane." "Isaac Kane," he replied. "What in blazes are you doing out here alone, Miss Lane? This stretch of desert has killed more than a few experienced travelers." "I was traveling to Virginia City," she said, accepting another drink when he offered the canteen again. This time she managed 3 more small swallows before he stopped her. "I thought I could cut through from the Sacramento road. My map showed a creek." Isaac shook his head. "Sweetwater Creek dried up 5 years ago when the mining operations upstream diverted the water. You are about 15 miles east of where you want to be, and that is if you are heading for the Comstock lode. If you mean the old Virginia City down south, you are going the wrong direction entirely." Rebecca closed her eyes in dismay. 15 miles. She never would have made it. "My horse collapsed this morning," she said quietly. "I have been walking since dawn." Isaac's expression softened with something that might have been sympathy or might have been admiration for her sheer stubbornness. "That explains why you are still alive. Walking in this heat is usually a death sentence, but you started early enough that you had not yet reached the worst of it. Another hour or two, though, and I would have found your body instead of you." The blunt words sent a chill through her despite the heat. She had come that close to dying. "We need to get you to shade and let you rest properly," Isaac continued. "My ranch is about 6 miles northwest of here. Can you ride? Or do I need to rig something on the pack mule? Rebecca bristled slightly at the suggestion that she could not manage a horse, even in her current state. I can ride. Isaac raised an eyebrow but did not argue. He helped her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed, and retrieved her saddlebag from where she had dropped it. Then he led her to his horse, a magnificent buckskin gelding that regarded her with mild curiosity. "This is Ranger," Isaac said, patting the horse's neck. "He will carry us both without complaint. The mule is stubborn and he lives up to his name, so you are better off with Ranger." Despite everything, Rebecca felt a small smile tug at her cracked lips. "You named your mule Stubborn." "He named himself," Isaac replied, and there was the faintest hint of humor in his voice. "I just acknowledged the fact." He mounted first, then reached down to help her up. Rebecca had ridden since childhood, but she had never ridden double with a man, and certainly not while pressed against his back with his arm steadying her. Under normal circumstances, it would have been highly improper. But these were not normal circumstances, and propriety meant little when the alternative was dying in the desert. Isaac settled her behind him, and Rebecca wrapped her arms around his waist, too exhausted to be embarrassed. He was solid and steady, radiating heat that somehow felt comforting rather than oppressive. She could feel the muscles in his back shift as he gathered the reins and clicked his tongue at Stubborn the mule. They set off at a walk, slow and steady, careful not to overtax the horses in the brutal heat. Isaac kept the canteen within easy reach and insisted that Rebecca drink every few minutes, small sips to keep her hydrated without making her sick. He drank sparingly himself, and Rebecca realized with a pang of guilt that by giving her the first and largest portions, he was putting himself at risk. "You should drink more," she said after they had been traveling for perhaps 20 minutes. "You need water too." "I am used to this climate," Isaac replied. "You are not. Besides, I have traveled these lands since I was 16 years old. I know my limits and I am nowhere near them yet." "Still," Rebecca persisted, "you should not sacrifice your own health for a stranger." Isaac was quiet for a moment before responding. "Out here, Miss Lane, we help each other or we all die. It is that simple. You needed water more than I did, so you drank first. That is not sacrifice. That is survival." There was something in his tone that suggested he had personal experience with the consequences of not helping others, but Rebecca did not press the issue. She was still too weak, too disoriented, and too grateful to be alive to engage in philosophical debates about the ethics of frontier life. As they rode, Isaac explained that his ranch, the Iron Creek Ranch, was one of several spreads in the area that raised cattle and horses for sale to the mining towns. He had inherited the land from his father 7 years ago and had been working to build it into something sustainable. "It is not much yet," he admitted, "but it is mine. I have about 200 head of cattle, a dozen good horses, and enough grazing land to support twice that if I can afford to buy more breeding stock." Rebecca listened to his deep voice, letting it wash over her like a lifeline. Talking seemed to come easily to him once he started, and she suspected he did not have much company out here. He told her about the challenges of ranching in Nevada, the constant battle against drought, and the rustlers who occasionally tried to make off with his cattle, the delicate negotiations with the Paiute people, whose traditional lands overlapped with the ranching territories. "We have an understanding, mostly," Isaac said. "I let them hunt on my land, and they do not interfere with my cattle. There has been a lot of bad blood over the years, a lot of broken promises from the government and violence from settlers who should know better. I try to be fair, and they respect that." It was a more nuanced view of relations with the native peoples than Rebecca had expected from a rancher. Many of the men she had known in Sacramento spoke of Indians as little more than obstacles to be removed, not human beings with legitimate claims to the land. Isaac's attitude suggested a man who thought deeply about justice and consequences. The landscape began to change gradually as they traveled. The flat, barren desert gave way to rolling hills dotted with more substantial vegetation, sagebrush, Joshua trees, and even a few scrubby juniper. In the distance, Rebecca could see the darker smudge of actual mountains, their peaks still capped with snow despite the summer heat in the lowlands. "Those are the East Humboldt Range," Isaac said when he noticed her looking. "The ranch sits in the foothills, where we get runoff from the snowmelt. That is why I have water when most of the desert does not. Iron Creek runs year-round, fed by springs in the mountains." It sounded like paradise to Rebecca after 3 days of desperate thirst. As they crested a low rise, Isaac pointed ahead. "There, that is home." Rebecca looked and saw a cluster of buildings nestled in a small valley. The main house was built of timber and stone, modest but well constructed, with a covered porch and real glass windows that glinted in the sunlight. There were several outbuildings, a barn, a stable, what looked like a bunkhouse, and various sheds and corrals. And running through the property, glittering like liquid silver, was a creek perhaps 20 feet wide, lined with cottonwood trees and actual green grass. It was the most beautiful thing Rebecca had ever seen. They rode down into the valley, and as they approached the house, a man emerged from the barn, shading his eyes against the sun. He was older than Isaac, perhaps 50, with grizzled gray hair and a pronounced limp that suggested an old injury. "Boss, you are back earlier than I expected," the man called out. Then he saw Rebecca and his expression shifted to surprise. "What happened?" "Found her about 6 miles southeast, near dead from thirst and heat," Isaac replied, dismounting and then helping Rebecca down. Her legs nearly gave out when her feet touched the ground and Isaac had to catch her. "Tom, can you tend to Ranger and Stubborn? I need to get Miss Lane inside and cooled down." Tom nodded, taking the reins. "I will take care of them. You get that girl into the shade before she keels over." Isaac did not need to be told twice. He scooped Rebecca up in his arms, ignoring her weak protest, and carried her toward the house. She wanted to object, to insist she could walk, but the truth was that she could not, and they both knew it. The interior of the house was blessedly cool, the thick walls and strategic window placement keeping out the worst of the heat. Isaac carried her to a bedroom and set her gently on the bed, which was covered with a simple but clean quilt. "I will get you some proper water and something to eat," he said. "Do not try to get up yet, you need to rest." He left, and Rebecca lay back against the pillows, too exhausted to do anything but marvel at her good fortune. The bed was soft, the room was cool, and she was alive. An hour ago, she had been certain she would die in the desert. Now she was in a comfortable ranch house with a man who had shared his water without hesitation. Isaac returned with a pitcher of water, a glass, and a plate containing some dried fruit and a piece of bread. "Eat slowly," he instructed. "Your stomach needs time to adjust." Rebecca obeyed, taking small bites and sips as he watched with concern. The bread was homemade and surprisingly good, the fruit sweet and reviving. After she had eaten about half of what he brought, she felt strong enough to speak properly. "Thank you," she said, meeting his eyes. "You saved my life, Mr. Kane. I do not know how I can ever repay that." Isaac shook his head. "No repayment needed, Miss Lane. I am just glad I was out checking fence lines in that direction today. If I had gone north instead of east, I would not have found you in time." "Why did you give me the water first?" Rebecca asked. "You must have been thirsty too, and you were taking a risk with your own safety." Isaac looked uncomfortable with the question, as if the answer should have been obvious. Because you needed it more. Because I have 2 canteens and you had barely a swallow left. Because I know where the water is and you did not. Because it was the right thing to do." "Many men would not have seen it that way," Rebecca said quietly. "They would have rationed it equally at best, or kept the larger share for themselves at worst." "Then many men are fools," Isaac replied bluntly. "What good is surviving alone if we lose our humanity in the process? Out here, we are all we have. We look after each other, or we all die alone in the dust." There was a conviction in his words that stirred something in Rebecca's chest. She had met many men in her life, but few who seemed to genuinely believe in something larger than their own interests. Most of the men she had known in Sacramento were concerned primarily with business, profit, and social standing. Isaac Kane spoke like a man who had been tested by the unforgiving land and had chosen to remain decent despite everything. "You should rest now," Isaac said, standing. "Sleep if you can. The heat sickness will take a day or two to fully pass, and you need to give your body time to recover. I will check on you in a few hours." Rebecca wanted to protest, to say she could not impose on his hospitality, but her body had other ideas. The moment he left the room, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave, and she sank into a deep, dreamless sleep. When she woke, the light coming through the window had shifted, suggesting several hours had passed. The room was still cool and comfortable, and someone had placed a wash basin with fresh water and a clean towel on the dresser. Rebecca sat up slowly, relieved to find that while she was still tired, the desperate weakness had faded. Her head no longer pounded, and her mouth did not feel like it was filled with cotton. She stood carefully and made her way to the wash basin, using the water and towel to clean the worst of the dust and grime from her face, neck, and hands. It felt wonderful to be clean again, even if her dress was still dusty and travel-stained. She wished desperately for a proper bath and clean clothes, but she would not presume to ask for more than had already been given. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Isaac in the main room of the house, which served as a combined kitchen and living area. He had cleaned up as well, his face freshly shaved and his hair damp, as if he had dunked his head in the creek. He was stirring something on the cast-iron stove, and the smell of cooking meat and vegetables made Rebecca's stomach growl audibly. Isaac turned and smiled when he heard her. "You are up. How are you feeling?" "Much better," Rebecca admitted. "Still tired, but much improved." "Thank you for the water and towel. Of course. Are you hungry? I am making stew. It is not fancy, but it is filling and should be easy on your stomach." "It smells wonderful," Rebecca said honestly. She moved to one of the wooden chairs at the table but hesitated, suddenly aware of how improper this all was. She was an unmarried woman alone in a house with an unmarried man, with no chaperone, no family, no one to ensure that propriety was maintained. In Sacramento, this would have been an outrageous scandal, but this was not Sacramento. This was the Nevada frontier, where the normal rules bent in the face of survival. And Isaac Kane did not seem like the kind of man who would take advantage of a woman in distress. "Sit," Isaac said, seeming to understand her hesitation. "Miss Lane, I want to make something clear. You are safe here. I know the situation is unusual, but my concern is your health, nothing more. When you are recovered, I will take you to Pyramid City. It is the closest settlement, about a day's ride from here. From there, you can arrange transport to Virginia City or wherever you need to go." His straightforward honesty eased her concerns, and Rebecca sat down. "Thank you, Mr. Kane. I appreciate your consideration and your help." "Isaac," he said, "if we are going to be sharing a house for the next day or two, we might as well use first names. And you are Rebecca, correct?" "Yes, Rebecca Lane." Isaac nodded and ladled stew into 2 bowls, setting one in front of her before taking his own seat. The stew was indeed simple but delicious. Chunks of beef, potatoes, carrots, and onions in a rich broth flavored with herbs. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Isaac spoke again. "So, you were traveling to Virginia City to be a school teacher?" "That was the plan," Rebecca confirmed. "I have my certificate and letters of recommendation. The position was supposed to start in 2 weeks, but I suppose I have ruined that now." "Not necessarily," Isaac said. "If I take you to Pyramid City tomorrow or the next day, you can send a telegram to Virginia City explaining the delay. I am sure they will understand, given the circumstances. Teachers are hard to come by out here. They will wait." Rebecca felt a spark of hope. She had been so sure that her foolish decision to take the shortcut had cost her the position, but perhaps all was not lost. "Do you really think so?" "I do," Isaac said firmly. "Anyone with the courage to travel alone from Sacramento to Virginia City is not someone who gives up easily. You had bad luck with the map and the dried-up creek, but you survived. That counts for something." They continued talking as they ate, and Rebecca found herself genuinely enjoying Isaac's company. He was intelligent and thoughtful, with a dry sense of humor that emerged when he relaxed. He told her more about the ranch, about the challenges and rewards of raising cattle and horses in such unforgiving country. He spoke of his father, who had staked the original claim 20 years ago and built the ranch from nothing, and of his mother, who had died of pneumonia when Isaac was 14. "It was just me and my father after that," Isaac said. "He taught me everything about ranching, about reading the land and the weather, about treating animals and people with respect. He was a hard man in some ways, but fair. He believed in keeping your word and helping your neighbors. Those were the principles he lived by, and I try to honor that." "He sounds like a good man," Rebecca said softly. "He was. I still miss him, even after 7 years." Rebecca shared her own story in turn, about her mother's death and her father's remarriage, about her stepmother's coldness and her determination to make her own way in the world. She told him about her studies, her teaching certificate, and her dreams of helping children learn to read and write, of giving them opportunities she had to fight for herself. "Education is power," Rebecca said with conviction. "Especially out here, where people need practical skills but also need to think critically, to question, to understand the world beyond their immediate circumstances. I want to give children that chance." Isaac listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he understood the importance of what she wanted to do. It was refreshing to talk to someone who did not dismiss her ambitions as foolish or unseemly for a woman. As the evening wore on, Rebecca realized with some surprise that she had not thought about propriety or scandal for the past hour. She had simply enjoyed talking with Isaac, sharing ideas and stories like they were old friends rather than strangers thrown together by chance. There was something easy about being around him, something that made her feel safe and valued in a way she had rarely experienced. When darkness fell, Isaac showed her back to the bedroom and took blankets to sleep on the floor in the main room, insisting that she take the bed. "There is a lock on the door if it makes you more comfortable," he said, "but I promise you have nothing to fear from me." "I believe you," Rebecca said, and she meant it. She slept deeply again that night, her body continuing to recover from the ordeal in the desert. When she woke the next morning to the sound of a rooster crowing, she felt almost like herself again. She dressed and ventured out to find Isaac already up, making coffee and frying eggs on the stove. "Good morning," he said with a smile. "You look much better. How are you feeling?" "Quite well, actually. I think I may have fully recovered." "Good. Tom and I need to ride out to check on the herd today. You are welcome to come along if you feel up to it, or you can rest here. I will be back by afternoon and we can leave for Pyramid City tomorrow morning." Rebecca considered. The idea of staying alone in the house was unappealing, but more than that, she was curious about the ranch and how it operated. "I would like to come if I will not be in the way." Isaac's smile widened. "You will not be. I will saddle a gentle mare for you. Can you handle a full day in the saddle?" "I grew up riding," Rebecca assured him. "I can manage." After a breakfast of eggs, bacon, and strong coffee, Isaac led her to the stable where he saddled 3 horses, Ranger for himself, a sturdy bay for Tom, and a pretty sorrel mare for Rebecca. "This is Cinnamon," Isaac said, introducing her to the mare. "She is steady and reliable with an easy gait. She will not give you any trouble." Rebecca stroked the mare's soft nose and received a friendly nicker in return. It felt good to be around horses again, to smell the familiar scents of leather and hay and horseflesh. She mounted easily, grateful for the divided riding skirt Isaac had somehow produced from somewhere in the house. It was too big for her, but it was infinitely more practical than trying to ride in her dress. They set out across the ranch, Tom riding slightly ahead to scout for any issues, Isaac and Rebecca riding side by side. The morning air was cool and fresh, not yet heated to the brutal temperatures of midday. The landscape was beautiful in its own harsh way, all golden grass and red rock, punctuated by the deep green of junipers and the silver blue of sage. As they rode, Isaac explained the routine of ranch life, the need to check water sources, to look for sick or injured animals, to watch for predators and rustlers, to maintain fences and corrals. It was constant work, he admitted, but satisfying. "Every year that the ranch survives and grows is a year I have beaten the odds," he said. "A lot of spreads go under out here. Drought, disease, bad luck, bad decisions. But the Iron Creek Ranch is still standing, and I intend to keep it that way." They found the main herd grazing in a broad valley where Iron Creek widened into a small meadow. The cattle were healthy-looking, a mix of breeds chosen for hardiness in the difficult climate. Isaac and Tom rode among them, checking for any signs of disease or injury, counting heads to make sure none had wandered off or been taken by rustlers. Rebecca watched from a small rise, impressed by the easy competence with which both men worked. Isaac moved through the herd with confidence, his body language relaxed but alert, missing nothing. He clearly loved this work, loved this land despite all its challenges. When they paused for a midday meal of dried beef and hardtack by the creek, Tom finally spoke directly to Rebecca for the first time. "I have been working for the Kane family for 23 years, he said, his weathered face serious. "First the father, now the son. They are good people, the best I have ever known. Isaac is honest, fair, and works harder than any man I have ever met. You should know that." Rebecca was not sure how to respond to this unexpected character reference. "I have no doubt of Mr. Kane's character, sir. He saved my life." Tom nodded, satisfied. "Just wanted you to know. Sometimes folks make assumptions about ranchers, think we are all rough men without principles. But Isaac Kane is the finest man in this territory, and I will not hear otherwise." Isaac, who had been watering the horses, returned in time to hear the last part of this speech. He looked mortified. "Tom, for heaven's sake." "Just speaking truth, boss," Tom said with a shrug. "Someone ought to tell her." They rode back to the ranch in the late afternoon, arriving as the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon. Rebecca was tired but satisfied, her muscles pleasantly sore from the day in the saddle. She had enjoyed herself more than she expected, had found genuine pleasure in the open spaces and the work of the ranch. As Isaac helped her dismount, his hand steady on her waist, Rebecca found herself very aware of his proximity, of the warmth of his touch through the fabric of her borrowed skirt. Their eyes met, and for a moment, something passed between them, some spark of recognition or possibility. Then Isaac stepped back, clearing his throat. "You did well today. You are a better rider than most women I have met." "Thank you," Rebecca said, and was annoyed to find herself blushing. That evening they shared another meal, this time with Tom joining them at the table. The older man was more talkative now, telling stories about the early days of the ranch, about Isaac's father and the challenges they had faced. Rebecca listened, fascinated by this glimpse into a world she had never known, a life built through sheer determination and hard work. When Tom finally retired to the bunkhouse, Isaac and Rebecca sat together on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The night air was cool and pleasant after the heat of the day, carrying the scent of sage and the sound of the creek burbling over stones. "I have been thinking," Isaac said after a long, comfortable silence, "about your teaching position." "What about it?" "Well, you said it is in Virginia City on the Comstock Lode." "Yes." Isaac was quiet for a moment, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Virginia City is a hard place, Rebecca. It is a boom town, rough and violent, full of miners and speculators and all the vice that follows easy money. The schools there are understaffed and underfunded, and the children who most need education often do not get it because they are working in the mines or doing whatever they can to help their families survive." "I understand that," Rebecca said. "That is part of why I want to teach there. Those children need someone who cares about their education." "They do," Isaac agreed, "but there are other places that need teachers just as badly, places that might be safer and offer a better quality of life." Rebecca turned to look at him. "What are you suggesting?" Isaac met her gaze steadily. "Pyramid City needs a teacher. We have about 200 people in the town and surrounding ranches, maybe 30 children of school age. Right now, those children are not getting any formal education at all. There is a building that was meant to be a school, but we have never been able to find a qualified teacher willing to come out here." Rebecca's heart began to beat faster. "Are you offering me a position?" "I am not in charge of hiring," Isaac clarified. "But I am on the town council, and I know for a fact that we would welcome a certified teacher with open arms. The pay would be comparable to what Virginia City is offering, maybe even a bit more because we are so desperate. And the town would provide housing, a small cottage near the school." It was tempting, incredibly tempting. The idea of teaching in a small, close-knit community rather than a rough mining town appealed to Rebecca. And if she was being honest with herself, the idea of being near Isaac Kane also appealed to her in a way that had nothing to do with practical considerations. "I would need to think about it," Rebecca said carefully. "I have already committed to the position in Virginia City. It would not be right to simply abandon that obligation without proper notice." "Of course," Isaac said quickly. "I am not asking you to make a decision tonight. Just think about it. When we get to Pyramid City tomorrow, you can meet some of the town leaders, see the school building, get a feel for the place. Then you can decide whether to send that telegram to Virginia City accepting the position there, or whether to send a different telegram declining it and accepting one in Pyramid City instead." Rebecca nodded slowly. "That seems fair." They sat together a while longer, not speaking, just enjoying the peace of the evening. Rebecca found herself stealing glances at Isaac's profile, at the strong line of his jaw, and the way the starlight caught in his hair. She had known him for barely 2 days, but something about him drew her in, made her want to know him better, made her imagine possibilities she had no business imagining. When she finally retired for the night, Rebecca lay awake for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. 3 days ago, she had been traveling alone to Virginia City, confident in her plans and her future. Now those plans had been upended, and she found herself considering a completely different path, one that involved staying in this harsh but beautiful land, teaching in a small frontier town, and possibly, just possibly, building a life that included Isaac Kane. It was foolish, she told herself. She barely knew the man. The attraction she felt was likely just gratitude mixed with the intensity of having survived a near-death experience. She should stick to her original plan, go to Virginia City, and make her own way as she had always intended. But even as she told herself these sensible things, her heart whispered otherwise. The next morning, they set out early for Pyramid City, taking their time and stopping frequently to rest the horses and stay hydrated. Isaac had packed plenty of water and provisions, and the journey was nothing like Rebecca's desperate flight across the desert. This time, she could actually appreciate the landscape, could see the beauty in the stark mesas and the play of light on the red rock formations. They talked as they rode, conversations flowing easily from topic to topic. Isaac told her about the history of Pyramid City, how it had been founded 15 years ago by a group of ranchers who needed a central location for supplies and commerce. It had grown slowly but steadily, never experiencing a boom like the mining towns but also never suffering a bust. It was a stable, practical community of people who worked hard and looked after their neighbors. "It is not exciting," Isaac admitted. "There is no opera house or fancy hotels. But there is a general store, a blacksmith, a doctor who comes through once a month, a church that serves all denominations, and good people who care about building something lasting." The more he talked about it, the more Rebecca found herself drawn to the idea. She had grown up in Sacramento, which was certainly more civilized than any frontier town, but she had never felt like she truly belonged there. The social rules were stifling, the expectations for women narrow and confining. Out here, there seemed to be more room to breathe, more space to be yourself without constant judgment. They arrived in Pyramid City in the early afternoon. The town was exactly as Isaac had described. Small, practical, built around a central street with wooden buildings that had been constructed to last rather than to impress. There were perhaps 20 structures in all, including homes, businesses, and the church with its modest steeple. Isaac led her directly to the general store, which apparently served as the unofficial meeting place for town business. The proprietor, a heavy-set man with a friendly face, greeted Isaac warmly and looked at Rebecca with open curiosity. "Marcus, this is Miss Rebecca Lane," Isaac said. "I found her in the desert 2 days ago, near dead from thirst. She is a certified teacher who was on her way to Virginia City. I mentioned that we have been looking for a teacher for our school." Marcus's eyes widened. "A real teacher. Miss Lane, it is a pleasure to meet you. Please, sit down. Can I get you something to drink? Water? Coffee?" "Water would be wonderful, thank you," Rebecca said, amused by his enthusiasm. Over the next hour, a small crowd gathered in the store as word spread that Isaac had brought a teacher to town. Rebecca met the mayor, a rancher named Henry Cooper, the doctor who happened to be in town on one of his monthly visits. Several mothers who lit up at the prospect of their children finally receiving formal education. And the minister, a jovial man named Pastor Williams who doubled as the town's unofficial historian. They peppered her with questions about her qualifications, her teaching philosophy, her willingness to work with children of varying ages and skill levels. Rebecca answered honestly, explaining her belief that every child deserved an education regardless of their family's economic status or background. that she believed in practical skills combined with classical learning, that she would be firm but fair in the classroom. "Would you like to see the school building?" Mayor Cooper asked. "It has been sitting empty for 2 years now, but we have kept it maintained in hopes that we would eventually find someone to fill it." Rebecca agreed, and the group walked together down the main street to a small building at the edge of town. It was simple but solidly constructed, with a peaked roof and large windows that would let in plenty of natural light. Inside, there was a single large room with a pot-bellied stove for heat, shelves for books, and space for desks and benches. There was even a small attached room that could serve as private quarters for the teacher. "We have been collecting books," one of the mothers explained, showing Rebecca several crates filled with primers, readers, and even a few more advanced texts. "Everyone has donated what they could. We know it is not much, but it is a start." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. These people had so little, but they had put together a school, had gathered resources, had waited patiently for someone to come and teach their children. How could she turn her back on that? The salary would be $75 a month, Mayor Cooper said, plus free housing here in the school cottage, and meals provided by families on a rotating basis, so you do not have to cook every day. We would also provide firewood in winter and whatever supplies you need for the classroom. It was actually slightly more than Virginia City had offered, and the housing arrangement was certainly better than the crowded boarding house she had been planning to live in. "I need to be honest with you," Rebecca said slowly. "I have already accepted a position in Virginia City. I do not want to leave them without a teacher if they are depending on me." "That is honorable," Pastor Williams said approvingly. "But perhaps you could send them a telegram explaining the situation. If they have other candidates, they may be willing to release you from your commitment. If not, well, we have waited this long. We can wait a bit longer until you are free to join us." It was reasonable, more than reasonable. These were good people, decent people, who understood about keeping your word and honoring your commitments. Rebecca looked at Isaac, who had been standing quietly at the back of the group, letting the town leaders make their case without interference. He met her eyes and gave a slight nod, as if to say that the decision was hers to make, and he would support whatever she chose. "I will send a telegram to Virginia City," Rebecca said finally. "I will explain what happened and ask if they have other candidates available. If they can find someone else, I would be honored to teach here in Pyramid City. But if they cannot, I will fulfill my commitment to them." "Does that seem fair?" The townspeople agreed enthusiastically, and Mayor Cooper immediately offered to take her to send the telegram from the general store, which had telegraph service once a week when the operator came through. The telegram was sent, and then there was nothing to do but wait for a response. Isaac suggested that Rebecca stay at the ranch while they waited, since the school cottage was not yet furnished for living. No one objected to this arrangement, though Rebecca noticed a few knowing looks exchanged between the married women. They rode back to the Iron Creek Ranch as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Rebecca felt strangely peaceful despite the uncertainty of her situation. Whatever happened, whether she ended up in Virginia City or Pyramid City, she had survived the desert. Everything else was a gift. Over the next 3 days while they waited for the telegram response, Rebecca settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She helped Tom with chores around the property, learning to feed chickens, collect eggs, and tend the vegetable garden that grew near the house. She rode out with Isaac each day to check on the herd, gradually learning to recognize individual animals and understand the signs of health or illness he looked for. In the evenings, she and Isaac would sit on the porch and talk, conversations that ranged from the practical to the philosophical. He told her about his dreams for the ranch, his hopes of expanding the horse breeding operation because good riding horses were always in demand. She shared her ideas for the school, her belief that education could transform lives and communities. But they also talked about smaller things, more personal things. Isaac spoke of his loneliness running the ranch alone, how he had thought about finding a wife but had never met anyone who seemed suited to the harsh realities of frontier life. Most women, he said, either wanted the excitement of the mining towns or the civilization of places like Sacramento or San Francisco. I need someone who understands that ranch life is hard work, he said. Someone who would not resent the isolation or the constant struggle against the elements. Someone who could be a partner, not just a decoration. Rebecca understood what he meant. She had seen too many marriages where the woman was treated as ornamental, expected to maintain the home and raise children but never to have thoughts or ambitions of her own. The idea of being a true partner, of working alongside someone toward common goals, was appealing in a way she had never quite articulated before. On the fourth day, Tom rode into town and returned with a telegram. Rebecca's hands shook slightly as she opened it, very aware that Isaac was watching her with an unreadable expression. The telegram was brief. Miss Lane, stop, understand your circumstances, stop, have second candidate available, stop, released from commitment if desired, stop, glad you survived, stop. Rebecca read it 3 times, making sure she understood correctly. Virginia City was willing to let her go. The decision was entirely hers. She looked up to find Isaac watching her intently. Well, he asked quietly. They have another candidate, Rebecca said slowly. They are willing to release me from the commitment. And what do you want to do? It was the right question, the only question that mattered. What did she want? Rebecca thought about the school in Pyramid City, about the children who needed a teacher, about the good people who had welcomed her with such warmth. She thought about the landscape, harsh but beautiful, and the sense of space and freedom she felt here that she had never experienced in Sacramento. And she thought about Isaac Kane, who had given her water without hesitation, who had shared his home and his life with her, who made her feel valued and respected in a way no man ever had before. I want to stay, Rebecca said, and as she spoke the words, she knew they were true. I want to teach in Pyramid City. Isaac's face broke into a genuine smile, the first truly unguarded expression she had seen from him. You are sure? I am sure. He crossed the space between them in 2 strides and took her hands in his. Rebecca, I am glad, so glad. I know we have only known each other for a few days, but I have to be honest with you. I have felt something from the moment I found you in the desert, something I have never felt before. Rebecca's heart was racing. Isaac, I feel it too, but we barely know each other. It might just be the intensity of the circumstances, the gratitude for being rescued. It might be, Isaac agreed. Or it might be something real, something worth exploring. Will you give us that chance? Stay in Pyramid City, teach at the school, and let us see where this leads. It was bold, improper by all conventional standards. They had known each other for less than a week, but nothing about this situation had been conventional from the start, and Rebecca had not come to the frontier to follow conventional rules. Yes, she said simply, I will stay. Isaac squeezed her hands gently, his eyes shining. Then let us go tell the town council they have a teacher. The next week passed in a flurry of activity. The town came together to furnish the school cottage, donating furniture, linens, dishes, and everything Rebecca would need to live comfortably. The women brought her fabric to make curtains and offered to help sew them. The men repaired a few loose boards on the porch and made sure the stove was in good working order. Rebecca threw herself into preparing the school for opening, organizing the donated books, planning lessons for students who would range from barely literate 6-year-olds to teenagers who had never attended school a day in their lives. It was daunting but exhilarating. Isaac was there every day, helping with the heavier work, offering suggestions, making sure she had everything she needed. They had not spoken again about the feelings acknowledged that day at the ranch, but the knowledge hung between them, sweet and full of promise. The school opened on a Monday morning in late July, and Rebecca stood at the door to greet 23 children ranging in age from 6 to 16. Some came from the town itself, others from surrounding ranches, riding in on horseback or driven by parents in wagons. They were shy at first, uncertain of this strange woman who spoke properly and expected them to sit in rows and raise their hands before speaking. But Rebecca was patient and kind, firm but never harsh. She started with an assessment to determine each child's skill level, then organized them into 3 groups so she could tailor instruction to their needs. The younger children learned basic reading and arithmetic. The middle group worked on more advanced reading, writing, and mathematics. The oldest students, some of whom were nearly Rebecca's age, studied history, geography, and even some basic science. It was exhausting, challenging work, but Rebecca loved every minute of it. These children were hungry for knowledge, eager to learn despite their rough manners and limited experience. She saw potential in all of them, from the 6-year-old who learned to read in just 2 weeks to the 16-year-old ranch hand who stayed after class each day to practice his writing because he wanted to be able to read more than the Bible and ranch ledgers. Isaac visited the school frequently, sometimes bringing supplies, sometimes just stopping by to see how things were going. Rebecca noticed that the children respected him, especially the boys, who clearly looked up to the young rancher as a model of what a man should be. One afternoon, about 6 weeks after the school had opened, Isaac asked if Rebecca would like to have dinner at the ranch on Saturday. "Tom is making his famous roast beef," he said, "and I thought we could talk about us." Rebecca agreed, her stomach fluttering with a mix of nervousness and anticipation. The attraction between them had only grown stronger over the weeks, but they had both been careful not to rush anything, to let the relationship develop naturally. Saturday arrived, and Isaac picked her up in his wagon as the sun was beginning to set. They drove to the ranch in comfortable silence, and Rebecca marveled at how much her life had changed in such a short time. 2 months ago, she had been dying of thirst in the desert. Now she was a teacher in a frontier town, on her way to dinner with a man she was falling in love with. Tom had outdone himself with the meal: roast beef, potatoes, fresh vegetables from the garden, and even an apple pie for dessert. They ate on the porch as the sky darkened and the stars emerged, talking about the school, the ranch, the upcoming winter, and what challenges it would bring. After Tom retired to the bunkhouse, Isaac and Rebecca remained on the porch. Isaac seemed nervous, which was unusual for him. Finally, he turned to face her directly. "Rebecca, I need to tell you something," he said. "These past 2 months, getting to know you, watching you build a life here, seeing how much the children love you and how well you fit into this community, it has been the best 2 months of my life." Rebecca's heart was pounding. "Isaac, let me finish," he said gently. "I know we have not known each other long by conventional standards, but out here we do not always have the luxury of long courtships and extended engagements. Life is hard and it is short, and when you find something worth holding on to, you hold on tight." He took both of her hands in his grip warm and steady. "I am in love with you, Rebecca Lane." I think I have been since the moment I gave you that first drink of water and saw the determination in your eyes, the will to survive. You are strong, intelligent, compassionate, and brave. You are everything I never knew I was looking for." Rebecca felt tears gathering in her eyes. "I love you too, Isaac. I tried to tell myself it was too fast, too impractical, but I cannot help it. You make me feel safe and valued and seen in a way I have never experienced before." Isaac smiled, that rare, unguarded smile that transformed his whole face. "Then will you marry me, Rebecca? Will you be my wife, my partner in building a life out here?" Rebecca did not hesitate. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." Isaac pulled her into his arms and they kissed for the first time, a kiss that was tender and passionate and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless and grinning like fools. "When?" Rebecca asked. "When should we marry?" "As soon as you want," Isaac said. "Tomorrow if you like, or we can wait, do it properly, let your family come out if you want." Rebecca thought about her father and stepmother, about the cold house in Sacramento where she had never quite belonged. "I would like to write to my father and let him know, but I do not need to wait for him to come. My family is here now. The people of Pyramid City, Tom, the students, and you." "Then let us talk to Pastor Williams tomorrow," Isaac suggested. "We can be married next weekend if you like, unless you want something more elaborate." Rebecca laughed. "I want to marry you, Isaac Kane. Everything else is just details." They talked late into the night, making plans, dreaming about the future. Isaac explained that once they were married, Rebecca could continue teaching if she wanted, or she could focus on the ranch, or she could do both. It would be her choice. "I want to keep teaching," Rebecca said firmly. "At least for now. Those children need me and I love the work, but I also want to be your wife, to build the ranch with you, to have a family of our own someday." "We will figure it out together," Isaac promised. "That is what partners do." The wedding took place the following Saturday in the small church in Pyramid City. The entire town turned out for the ceremony, filling the pews and spilling out into the street. Rebecca wore a simple white dress that the town's women had helped her sew, and Isaac wore his best suit, looking handsome and slightly uncomfortable in the formal clothing. Pastor Williams performed the ceremony, his voice warm and joyful as he spoke about the sacred bond of marriage, about partnership and love and building a life together. When Isaac and Rebecca exchanged their vows, there was not a dry eye in the church. "I, Isaac Michael Kane, take you, Rebecca Marie Lane, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. I, Rebecca Marie Lane, take you, Isaac Michael Kane, to be my lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part." They sealed their vows with a kiss, and the church erupted in applause and cheers. The celebration afterward lasted well into the night, with food and dancing and music provided by a couple of ranchers who played fiddle and guitar. Rebecca danced with Isaac, with Tom, with Mayor Cooper and half the men in town. She felt welcomed, accepted, loved by this community that had taken her in as one of their own. As the party finally wound down and Rebecca and Isaac prepared to return to the ranch, which was now their home together, Rebecca took a moment to look up at the stars. They were brilliant out here, away from city lights, stretching in a vast canopy overhead. "What are you thinking?" Isaac asked, coming to stand beside her. "I am thinking about how strange life is," Rebecca said softly. 2 months ago I was dying in the desert, convinced my life was over. Now I am married to a wonderful man, teaching children I have come to love, living in a place I never knew existed. All because you gave me the first drink of water without hesitating." Isaac wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "I would make that choice again in a heartbeat. Every time. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me, Rebecca Kane." Rebecca leaned into his warmth, feeling perfectly content. "And you are the best thing that has ever happened to me." They stood together under the stars for a long moment before Isaac gently led her to the wagon for the ride home. Home. The word had new meaning now. Not just a place, but a person, a partnership, a future they would build together. The first year of their marriage was not without challenges. The ranch work was demanding, especially as fall turned to winter, and they had to prepare for the harsh cold that came to the high desert. Rebecca continued teaching through it all, getting up before dawn to help with the early morning chores before riding into town for the school day, then returning in the evening to help with dinner and whatever other work needed doing. It was exhausting, but it was also fulfilling in a way she had never imagined. She was using her mind and her body, contributing to both her community and her household, living a life that was wholly her own while being part of something larger. Isaac was true to his word about being a partner. He never expected Rebecca to give up teaching or to confine herself to traditional women's work. When she wanted to learn more about ranching, he taught her patiently, showing her how to read the signs of weather, how to handle cattle, how to break and train horses. When she was overwhelmed with lesson planning, he helped her develop curriculum, offering practical insights about what skills the children would need most in this environment. They learned each other's rhythms, their strengths and weaknesses, how to work together and when to give each other space. They laughed together, struggled together, and at night fell into bed exhausted but content, wrapped in each other's arms. In the spring, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant. The news brought joy mixed with apprehension. She wanted children, had always imagined herself as a mother, but she was not sure how she would manage teaching while pregnant and with a baby. Isaac was ecstatic at the news but sensitive to her concerns. "We will figure it out," he assured her. "Maybe you take some time off after the baby is born, or maybe we find someone to help with child care so you can keep teaching if you want. There are no rules that say you have to choose between being a mother and being a teacher." The town was equally supportive. Several of the older women offered to help with the baby once it was born, and the school board assured Rebecca that her position would be waiting for her whenever she was ready to return, whether that was a few months or a few years. Rebecca taught through the summer and into early fall, finally stepping away from the classroom when she was 8 months along, and movement became difficult. A young man from one of the ranching families, who had some education and a desire to teach, took over temporarily, with Rebecca advising him from home when needed. Isaac Daniel Kane was born on a cold November morning in 1879, arriving after a long but uncomplicated labor. He was perfect, with his father's gray-blue eyes and a head full of dark hair. Isaac Sr. was besotted from the first moment he held his son, cradling the tiny infant with the same gentle care he showed with newborn foals. "He is perfect," Isaac whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Rebecca, you are amazing. Thank you for this gift." Rebecca, exhausted but happy, smiled at the sight of her husband with their son. "We made him together. Thank you for being the kind of man I want our son to grow up to be." The first few months with a newborn were chaotic and sleep-deprived, but the community rallied around the new family. Women brought meals, helped with laundry, offered to hold the baby so Rebecca could nap. Tom became an unlikely but devoted grandfather figure, often found rocking little Daniel and singing old cowboy songs in an off-key baritone. When spring came and Daniel was 5 months old, Rebecca began to feel the itch to return to teaching, at least part-time. She discussed it with Isaac, who was supportive but cautious. "Only if you want to," he said firmly. "We can manage financially without your salary if you would rather stay home with Daniel." "I know," Rebecca said, "but I miss the children, miss teaching. I think I can manage mornings at the school if I bring Daniel with me. Some of the older girls could help watch him, and I could nurse him during breaks." They tried it, and to everyone's surprise, it worked beautifully. Daniel became a sort of classroom mascot, sleeping in a cradle at the front of the room during lessons, passed among the older students during breaks. The children loved having a baby at school, and it gave the girls practical experience in child care while allowing Rebecca to continue the work she loved. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons, of planting and harvest, of school years beginning and ending, of watching Daniel grow from infant to toddler to a bright, curious little boy. The ranch prospered under Isaac's careful management, the cattle herd growing, the horse breeding operation becoming known throughout the territory for producing quality animals. When Daniel was 3, Rebecca became pregnant again. This time, she knew what to expect, felt more confident in her ability to balance motherhood and teaching. Sarah Rose Kane was born in the spring of 1883, a beautiful baby girl with her mother's dark hair and her father's steady nature. With 2 children, life became even more complicated, but also richer. Daniel was an attentive big brother, fascinated by his baby sister and eager to help care for her. Rebecca continued teaching, now with both children sometimes in attendance, creating a warm, family atmosphere in the classroom that the students loved. Isaac proved to be a devoted father, spending time with his children even after long days of ranch work, teaching Daniel to ride almost as soon as the boy could walk, holding Sarah for hours while she slept against his chest. He was patient and gentle, but also firm when needed, exactly the kind of father Rebecca had hoped he would be. The community of Pyramid City grew and evolved around them. New families arrived, drawn by the stability and the promise of good ranching land. The school expanded, eventually requiring a second teacher for the younger children, allowing Rebecca to focus on the older students and more advanced subjects. The church was rebuilt with a proper bell tower. A doctor settled permanently in town, tired of traveling circuit and ready to put down roots. Through it all, Isaac and Rebecca remained partners in every sense of the word. They made decisions together, supported each other's dreams, weathered setbacks, and celebrated successes as a team. Their love deepened and matured, becoming something solid and enduring, a foundation for everything else in their lives. When Daniel was 7 and Sarah was 4, Rebecca found herself pregnant again. This pregnancy was more difficult than the previous 2, with constant exhaustion and sickness that lasted well beyond the first trimester. Isaac insisted she stop teaching temporarily, bringing in the young teacher full-time to replace her. Rebecca chafed at the forced rest, but had to admit she needed it. The pregnancy was hard on her body, now 31 years old and worn from years of frontier life. But Isaac was attentive and supportive, taking on extra work around the house, making sure she rested, bringing her whatever she needed. Thomas Isaac Kane, named for both his father and Tom, who had passed away peacefully in his sleep the previous winter, was born in early 1887. He was a large baby, nearly 10 pounds, and the birth was long and difficult. For several terrifying hours, Isaac feared he might lose Rebecca, but she pulled through, exhausted and battered but alive. "No more," Isaac said firmly as he held her hand while she recovered. "I love our children, but I am not willing to risk your life for more. 3 is plenty." Rebecca, too tired to argue, simply nodded, 3 children was indeed plenty, a full and blessed life. Thomas was a colicky baby, crying more than his siblings had, demanding constant attention. But Daniel and Sarah were old enough to help now, and between the family and the community support, they managed. Rebecca took a full year away from teaching this time, focusing on recovering her strength and caring for her family. But when Thomas turned 1 and proved to be a happy, healthy toddler, Rebecca felt the pull to return to the classroom. The school board had kept her position open, hoping she would come back, and she did, teaching 3 days a week while the younger teacher handled the other 2 days. It was a good balance, allowing her to continue the work she loved while still having plenty of time for her children and the ranch. Isaac had hired a couple of ranch hands as the operation expanded, which took some of the pressure off him, allowing him to spend more time with the family as well. The children grew and thrived. Daniel inherited his father's love of ranching, spending every free moment helping with the cattle and horses, learning the business from the ground up. Sarah was more academically inclined, devouring every book she could get her hands on, talking about maybe becoming a teacher like her mother. Thomas was still too young to show clear inclinations, but he was a happy, affectionate child who loved everyone and everything. In 1890, when Rebecca was 34 and Isaac was 39, they celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary with a party that once again brought out the entire town. Pyramid City had grown to nearly 500 people now, a thriving community with several businesses, regular church services, and a school that was the pride of the region. As Rebecca stood with Isaac, watching their children play with the other town children, she reflected on the strange path that had led her here. A nearly fatal mistake in the desert had become the best thing that ever happened to her. A moment of kindness from a stranger, offering the first drink of water without hesitation, had changed the entire trajectory of her life. "What are you thinking?" Isaac asked, the same question he had asked on their wedding night and countless times since. "I am thinking about water," Rebecca said with a smile. "About a cowboy rancher who had only 1 canteen left and miles to go, who gave me the first drink without hesitating. That single act of kindness changed everything." Isaac pulled her close, kissing her temple. "It was not kindness. It was necessity. You needed help and I was there to give it. Anyone would have done the same." "No," Rebecca said firmly. "Not anyone. Many men would have rationed carefully, keeping the larger share for themselves. But you gave me what I needed without hesitation. That told me everything I needed to know about who you are." Isaac smiled, that warm, genuine smile she had come to love so dearly. "Well, I am glad my canteen was the one that found you in the desert. I cannot imagine my life without you now." "Nor I without you," Rebecca replied, leaning into his embrace. They stood together, watching the sun set over the Nevada landscape that had nearly killed Rebecca, but had instead given her everything she had ever wanted. The years ahead would bring more challenges, more joys, more sorrows. The children would grow up, face their own trials, make their own choices. The ranch would continue to demand hard work and constant vigilance. The school would need dedicated teachers to shape the next generation. But through it all, Isaac and Rebecca would face it together, partners in every sense, bound by love and respect and the memory of a desperate day in the desert when a cowboy rancher had offered water to a dying stranger and changed both their lives forever. Daniel eventually took over the ranch when Isaac decided to step back at age 55, his body worn from decades of hard labor. Sarah did become a teacher, opening a small school in a neighboring community before marrying a kind-hearted shopkeeper and having 4 children of her own. Thomas surprised everyone by showing a talent for veterinary medicine, studying under the town doctor, before specializing in animal care and becoming invaluable to the ranching community. Isaac and Rebecca's grandchildren filled their later years with joy and chaos. They moved to a smaller house on the ranch property when Daniel married, giving the main house to the younger family, as was proper. But they remained active in the community, Rebecca teaching occasionally when the regular teachers needed help, Isaac advising on ranch matters and serving on the town council. They celebrated their 25th anniversary in 1903, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and a community that honored them as founding members and beloved leaders. Rebecca was 53 now, her dark hair streaked with silver, lines around her eyes from years of squinting into the desert sun. Isaac was 62, his hair fully gray, his body showing the wear of a lifetime of hard work, but his eyes still that same striking gray-blue, still looking at Rebecca with the same love he had shown from the beginning. 25 years, Rebecca marveled as they sat on the porch of their small house, watching the sun set over the mountains. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you found me in the desert. Other times, it feels like I have known you my entire life. Both are true in a way, Isaac said, taking her hand. We have lived a lifetime together, built a family, a community, a legacy. But I still remember that day as clearly as if it were yesterday. The way you looked when I first saw you, sitting in the dust, more stubborn than sensible, refusing to give up even when death was breathing down your neck. Rebecca laughed. I was terrified, but I could not let the desert win. I had too much I still wanted to do. And have you done it? Have you lived the life you wanted? Rebecca considered the question seriously. She thought about the schoolhouse in Pyramid City, where 3 generations of children had learned to read and write, where minds had been open to possibilities beyond the immediate horizon. She thought about their children, good people who contributed to their communities and raised their own children with love and values. She thought about the ranch, prospering and providing livelihoods for multiple families. She thought about the town itself, growing from a rough frontier settlement into a real community with culture and care for its members. And most of all, she thought about the man sitting beside her, who had given her water in the desert and had continued giving her everything she needed every day since. Love, respect, partnership, adventure, security, joy. Yes, Rebecca said simply. I have lived exactly the life I wanted. Better than I ever imagined. Isaac squeezed her hand gently. As have I. You were the missing piece, Rebecca. The thing I did not even know I needed until I found you. They sat together in comfortable silence, as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. The same stars that had shone on their wedding night, that had witnessed every triumph and trial of their years together. Rebecca thought about fate, about chance, about the strange and unpredictable ways that lives intersect and change. If she had not taken that shortcut, had not gotten lost, had not been dying in the desert that particular day at that particular time, she never would have met Isaac Kane. She would have gone to Virginia City, taught in the rough mining town, perhaps married someone else or remained a spinster teacher. She might have had a good life, a satisfying life, but it would not have been this life. And if Isaac had not been checking fence lines in that exact location, if he had gone north instead of east as he mentioned, if he had decided to put off the task for another day, he would have ridden past a pile of bones in the desert and never known what he had missed. But the stars had aligned. Fate or chance or divine providence had brought them together at exactly the right moment. And one simple act of kindness, one canteen of water offered without hesitation, had set in motion everything that followed. Years continued to pass, marked by the rhythm of seasons and generations. Isaac and Rebecca watched their grandchildren grow, attended their weddings, held their great-grandchildren. The ranch passed to the third generation, with Daniel's eldest son taking over management, while Daniel himself became an elder statesman of the ranching community. Pyramid City celebrated its 50th anniversary in 1908, a major milestone for a frontier town. The celebration included a historical pageant, with actors recreating significant moments in the town's history. Rebecca was honored when the schoolchildren presented a scene depicting her arrival, showing a young actress nearly dead in the desert being rescued by a cowboy rancher who offered her water. "Is that really how it happened, Grandma?" one of her great-grandchildren asked, wide-eyed at the dramatic presentation. "Yes, sweetheart," Rebecca said, pulling the child onto her lap. "I was dying in the desert and your great-grandfather saved my life. He gave me water even though he did not have much himself, and that kindness changed everything." "Did you fall in love right away?" Rebecca smiled, glancing at Isaac, who was watching with amusement. "Not right away, but quickly. Your great-grandfather is a very easy man to love." Isaac's health began to decline when he reached 70. Nothing dramatic, just the slow wearing down of a body that had worked hard for decades. His joints ached in the morning, his energy was not what it had been, his hearing was starting to fade. But his mind remained sharp, and his love for Rebecca never wavered. Rebecca herself was 63, her own body showing the marks of time but still relatively strong. She had stopped teaching regularly several years ago, though she still occasionally gave lessons to children who needed extra help or told stories about the old days to classes studying local history. They spent their days quietly now, enjoying the peace they had earned. They sat on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset, talking about the past and the future, making sure each other knew how much they were loved. Their children and grandchildren visited frequently, filling the small house with noise and laughter and life. On a warm July evening in 1912, 34 years after that fateful day in the desert, Isaac and Rebecca sat on their porch, watching another spectacular sunset paint the Nevada sky in shades of orange and purple and gold. "You remember," Isaac said quietly, "what you said on our wedding night? About looking at the stars and thinking about how strange life is." "I remember," Rebecca replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I have been thinking about that lately, about how one decision, one moment can change everything. If I had gone north that day instead of east, if you had not gotten lost, if I had rationed the water more carefully, any of those things, and we never would have found each other." "But we did find each other," Rebecca said firmly, "and we built a beautiful life together. That is what matters." Isaac nodded, pulling her closer. "I want you to know, Rebecca, that every single day with you has been a gift. Even the hard days, even the days when nothing went right and we were exhausted and worried. Every day with you was better than any day without you could have been." Rebecca felt tears gathering in her eyes. "I love you, Isaac Kane. I have loved you from that first drink of water when I saw the kind of man you were, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." They sat together as the stars emerged, talking quietly about their life, their memories, their family. At some point, Rebecca dozed off, comfortable and warm in Isaac's embrace. When she woke a while later, stiff from sitting in one position, she realized Isaac had fallen asleep too, his arms still around her shoulders, his breathing slow and even. She did not wake him, just sat quietly, feeling his warmth, listening to him breathe, grateful for every moment they had shared. This man, this wonderful, kind, strong man who had given her water in the desert, who had given her his name and his heart and his life. This was what love looked like. Not grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but decades of showing up for each other, day after day, choosing each other again and again. The stars wheeled overhead, the same stars that had shone on a desperate woman dying in the desert, on a young rancher riding out to check his fences, on a first kiss and a wedding, and the births of children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The stars that would continue shining long after they were gone, bearing witness to all the ordinary miracles of human life. Rebecca smiled, content and at peace, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived. Family, community, love. All because a cowboy rancher had one canteen left and miles to go, and had given her the first drink without hesitating. That single act of kindness had changed 2 lives completely, had created a family, had helped build a community. It had proven that even in the harshest environments, even when resources are scarce and survival is uncertain, there is room for generosity, for compassion, for putting another person's needs before your own. And from that single act had grown this. A love story that spanned decades, that weathered every storm, that created ripples spreading out into future generations. A love story that began with water in the desert and would endure long after the desert had reclaimed them both. Isaac and Rebecca Kane lived several more years together, each day a precious gift. When Isaac finally passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 75, Rebecca grieved deeply but without regret. They had said everything that needed saying, had lived fully, had loved completely. And when Rebecca herself passed 3 years later at the age of 70, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, her last words were a whisper. "Thank you for the water." The town of Pyramid City, Nevada, erected a memorial to its founding families in the town square, and prominent among them were Isaac and Rebecca Kane. Teacher, rancher, community leaders, and most of all, partners in a love story that began with a simple act of kindness in the unforgiving desert and grew into something that shaped a community for generations. Their great-great-grandchildren still ranch the same land, still teach in schools descended from the one Rebecca founded, still tell the story of the day a dying woman met a rancher with one canteen left and miles to go, who gave her the first drink without hesitating, and changed the course of 2 lives forever. It is a story about survival, about kindness, about the unexpected ways that love finds us when we least expect it. A story about how one decision, one moment of compassion, can echo through time, creating ripples that spread far beyond anything we can imagine. It is a story of the American West, of hardship and hope, of building something lasting in an unforgiving land. But most of all, it is a love story, pure and simple, beginning in desperation and ending in contentment, proving that sometimes the greatest adventures start with the smallest acts of human decency. The Iron Creek Ranch still operates today, its water still flowing clear and cold from the mountain springs, a testament to the man and woman who built a life there, who raised a family, who served a community, and who loved each other through all the joys and sorrows that life could bring. And on summer evenings, if you visit at sunset, you can almost see them. 2 figures sitting on a porch, watching the stars emerge, holding hands, content in the knowledge that they found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. One canteen left and miles to go, and a cowboy rancher gave her the first drink without hesitating. Everything else followed from that moment, cascading forward through time, proving that kindness is never wasted, that love can bloom in the harshest environments, and that the choices we make in moments of crisis define not just our own lives, but the lives of everyone who comes after us.